Graphics are one of the most important components of games. While they're not everything, they're definitely something. What would you do if you downloaded a game and it looks like this?
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
My boy.
I'm deleting that immediately. If I play a game that looks like the developers dropped a dookie on my screen, I'm out of there. Still though, do we care too much about graphics, and do they matter anymore? The video game industry has always made graphics one of their top priorities. It's not like graphics are the only thing that matters, but it's undeniable that the easiest way to prove that the next generation of consoles is a worthy upgrade is to point to a game and talk about how much better it looks on the next gen consoles. You need to buy our brand new console because it's capable of outputting up to 65% more detailed nose hairs. As we've gone through this generation though, I've started to pick up on a worrying trend. This generation has what feels like the longest cross-gen period ever, with plenty of games being put out on both the PS5 and the PS4, and both the Xbox One and the Series X. Sure, there are a handful of games that can only be played on the new hardware, but not many. New games that come out on the Xbox One and the PS4 take a hit in graphical fidelity and their frame rates, of course, but it doesn't look all that bad, and it's far from unplayable. My Xbox One did sound like it was gonna explode after about 15 seconds of Black Ops Cold War gameplay though, so I ultimately did have a reason to upgrade from my Xbox One to the Xbox Series X. I can't say the same about upgrading from the PS5 to the PS5 Pro though. Now, look, I love Mark Cerny with a passion. That man could read an economics textbook and I'd still be entertained. He is a treasure that we must protect. However, not even he could convince me to buy a PS5 Pro. If not even the sexiest voice on the planet can convince me to buy the product, then what can? You want to know why I won't be buying the PS5 Pro?
Because I'm all out of money!
The whole selling point of the PS5 Pro is that it runs games with better graphics at a better frame rate. Sounds great, right? Wrong. It's got a cool AI-driven upscaling system and an improved GPU, which are both great on paper, don't get me wrong. But what do the games look like in action? Well, yeah, no, that is a whole different story. Look at these two screenshots. Can you tell the difference between these two pictures? No, you can't. Now, this may not entirely be Sony's fault since they were showcasing the improved graphics through a compressed video stream, which will inevitably lower the resolution of the screenshots. Still though, it is a bit concerning that there's virtually no difference to be seen here between the graphics of the PS5 and the PS5 Pro, or at the very least, not something insanely noticeable that would make me want to upgrade. It's like the remasters that Sony has been releasing for the PS5. Sony remastered both Last of Us games, overhauling the graphics specifically for PS5. Why would you spend $70 on The Last of Us Part 1 when you could get The Last of Us Remastered, a game that's almost the exact same and plays on the PS5, for just $10? That is $60 cheaper. Not every remaster has been terrible, since you are able to upgrade to some of them for $10, and some of them even come with new content to play through. But still, I am not invested in the graphics enough to go out and buy these remasters. I'll only buy something like that if the game wasn't already available on that console, or if the re-release makes a significant improvement over the original. If it's backwards compatible, why bother? Now, look, it's no biggie if I don't get the PS5 Pro or anything. With a price like $700, I definitely won't be getting it unless I end up on Wheel of Fortune. Plus, it's not like there will be any PS5 Pro exclusive games. So, you know what? Who cares? What happens when the next generation rolls around, though?
It's being called the biggest fucking waste of your hard-earned money to come along in years. Sony's new stupid box thing hit the shelves at crowded malls and overpriced electronics stores around the country today.
Mid-gen refreshes don't provide nearly as big of a leap in graphical fidelity as a new generation, but the PS5 Pro paints a pretty bleak picture. We've already pushed graphical fidelity so far. How much better can it really get? This plateau is going to be a serious issue for future generations since that gets rid of a huge selling point for those consoles. Why get the next console if the same games look and run just fine on the current one? This plateau in graphics may actually end up being a blessing in disguise though. Each new console, at its heart, has been about providing hardware that allows game developers to create more innovative experiences. That power has allowed graphics to become more realistic, yeah, but it's also allowed developers to create larger worlds, more interactive environments, and reduce loading times. The jump from the SNES to the N64 wasn't just about the improved graphics, but it was also about the fact that games could now be played in 3D, which was a huge shakeup for game design. The jump from the N64 to the GameCube wasn't just about improved graphics, but it meant that games could now be bigger, more things could happen at once, game physics could be more accurate, and the world can be more interactive. Sometimes though, more powerful hardware isn't the most important part of a generation. Take the Wii for example. It was basically just a polished GameCube, but it still revolutionized game design. Despite not having a significant difference in raw power, the Wii took the world by storm. So how did that even happen? The Wii introduced motion controls, which allowed for such different gameplay than anything we had ever seen before on a home console. People weren't confined to a controller. Now they could perform an action in real life and watch it happen in-game. Rather than pressing a button to swing a tennis racket, you can actually swing the Wii remote and the tennis racket will move. Rather than pressing a button to swing your sword, you could actually swing the Wii remote and watch the sword move in-game. It's such a simple idea, yet it was so revolutionary. Hardware can also be used to let players experience games in a way that they never could before. The Switch is, for the most part, a polished Wii U. It is ridiculously behind the PS5 and Xbox Series X in terms of hardware, and yet it has still managed to keep up with the PS5 and Xbox Series X in terms of sales. The Switch's hardware was revolutionary because it allowed you to play both on your television and on the go. My jaw dropped when I first saw the reveal trailer for the Switch. It was something I always wanted with the Wii U. I dreamed of being able to take my home console games on the go with me, and the Switch would let me do just that. The Switch's hardware may be incredibly underpowered, but the console has still managed to sell like hotcakes because the hardware allows for a unique gameplay experience. Sure, you can play Red Dead Redemption on your big 4K TV at home on an Xbox or a PlayStation, and it would look much better than it does on the Switch, but you can't use those consoles to play that game on the go. A lot of the magic of the Switch is seeing games we could only play at home become playable on the go. On top of that, it also has plenty of other cool features from past Nintendo consoles like a touchscreen, meaning that there were more gameplay opportunities for game developers than ever. I believe that gameplay will always come before graphics. You could make the most beautiful game I will ever have the opportunity to lay my eyes on, but if it's not fun, I won't bother playing it. There were some points in Tears of the Kingdom where the graphics were, questionable, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a good game. I loved Tears of the Kingdom, and I had so much fun with it because the gameplay at its core was amazing. I'm paying much more attention to the gameplay than the graphics. I felt the same way with Pokemon Legends Arceus. Just watching the trailers, yeah, it looks horrible, but when you're actually playing the game, you're so focused on the gameplay that you completely forget about the visual disgrace that your eyes are fixed upon. Of course, you could also have amazing gameplay, and if the graphics look like Da Vinci threw up on the screen, sure, that won't be very fun either. But at the end of the day, gameplay is always the priority here, and that's what the console's hardware should be designed to enhance. I think that Sony understood this with the PS5. Of course, they made the console significantly more powerful than what we got with the PS4, but the console's raw power isn't the only thing that got an upgrade. The DualSense controller introduced plenty of new features that actually make a huge difference in the games that use them. The DualSense controller has adaptive triggers, which make it harder to press down on the triggers depending on the situation. The rumble is significantly better on the DualSense controller than any other PlayStation controller, so much so that you can figure out what surface a character is walking on without even looking at the screen or listening to any audio. Speaking of audio, there's a speaker and a microphone built into the controller, which can allow games to be more immersive and allows for communicating with teammates in multiplayer games just through your controller. The PS5's hardware is about much more than simply making a more powerful console. Astrobot is a game that I'm pretty confident could run on the PS4 and look equally as good, but it's exclusive to the PS5 because it uses features that only the DualSense controller has. It could be ported over to the PS4, but then Astrobot would lose a massive part of what makes it fun and unique. The Xbox Series X didn't have any changes as massive as what we got with the DualSense controller, but the quick resume feature it introduced is definitely something worth upgrading for. I didn't think it would make much of a difference when I first got my Series X, but I was definitely wrong. I cannot go back to the Xbox One after using quick resume. I think this is where the PS5 Pro got things wrong. An upgrade to graphics is great, and you know what? Fine, a mid-gen refresh is not at all the same thing as a new generation, but still, in a time where graphics already look so realistic, you need to do something more than just improving graphical fidelity, especially if you're going to make the thing cost $700. This is why I think that the plateau in graphics can actually be a blessing in disguise. Hopefully companies like Microsoft and Sony realize that they need to do more to innovate with their consoles in order to get people to buy them. According to a document leaked in the court case for Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard, Microsoft is, or at least was, planning to release their next generation of consoles in 2028. Now, 2028 is pretty far away, so you know what? Who knows? Maybe some crazy innovation will happen and it'll allow for the next generation of consoles to have a truly generational leap in graphics. My money says that that is not going to happen though. Even now, 4 years into this generation, most games still aren't taking full advantage of the hardware. If Microsoft really wants me to go out and buy a new console in 2028, they need to add some sort of gimmick to their console, some sort of hook. Why make a game exclusive to the next generation of consoles if it would be virtually the same on the current generation? Why would I go out and buy the next generation of consoles if my experience will be virtually the same on the current current generation. Their next generation of consoles needs to have a special feature that games can take advantage of to make original and innovative gameplay. Now, will we actually see any crazy new concepts from these companies? Probably not. It's very likely that Sony and Microsoft won't do that much to set their next generation apart from the current one. Still though, if they want to make a generational leap like they once did, they'll have to start innovating in areas other than graphical fidelity. Plus, why are we so invested in how realistic a game looks anyways? You know, don't get me wrong, I love realistic games, but I don't think that every game has to be in 8K resolution with insanely realistic graphics in order to truly look good. At the end of the day, I think the art style of a game and how it's utilized matters way more than the actual graphics themselves. The best example of that is from the GameCube generation. Zelda fans were begging for a realistic Zelda game, but what they got instead was the Wind Waker, which had a cel-shaded, cartoony art style. Needless to say, the fans were pissed, but they eventually got their realistic Zelda game when Twilight Princess came out at the end of the generation. Even though Twilight Princess had much more detailed graphics and took advantage of the hardware more, I think that the art styles of both games are great, and they were used as more of an art decision than a necessity due to poor hardware. The Wind Waker is about a child that suddenly now has to save everybody. The cartoony art style portrays the innocence and goofiness that Link still has, because he's just a kid. In Twilight Princess though, it's much different. Link is much older, and the story is much darker. The realistic art style portrays the more gritty story of Twilight Princess way better than a cartoony art style would. In the end though, I would much rather choose childhood innocence over being emo. So although the Wind Waker wasn't as graphically impressive, I actually think it looks better. Plenty of amazing games that have come out recently have used less realistic graphics as an art decision, and it adds so much to the game. Do you think Stardew Valley is pixelated because the developer wasn't able to make it more realistic? Of course not! The pixelated art style adds to the cozy and nostalgic vibes of the game. Shovel Knight's art style is a way that it honors the games that it took inspiration from, and Cuphead's cartoony art style complements the story and music really well. Graphics really don't matter as long as the art style is good. So now that we're entering a time where graphical fidelity won't be able to improve in the same massive ways that it used to, I think developers should be putting more thought into the art style of their games if they want to continue to innovate visually. It seems that improved graphics have always been a byproduct of innovation and not the innovation itself. The main use of the improved hardware is to create experiences that older hardware simply isn't capable of running. Sure, with the N64, the graphics were much better because now they're in 3D, but I think the much bigger change there is all the changes that were made to game design because it's in 3D, not the 3D graphics itself. We get better graphics because of improved hardware, but that's not the primary reason we needed improved hardware in the first place. People place too much of an emphasis on how good a game looks, and I think that Sony and Microsoft will have plenty of issues in store for them if they keep chasing better graphics. Nintendo learned their lesson long ago, and it's worked out great for them. Of course, that isn't to say that Nintendo doesn't have their own slew of issues to deal with, but their strategy is much more future-proof than Sony and Microsoft's, which is funny, because Nintendo's hardware is anything but future-proof. It's outdated. We don't know what Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo are all planning to do, but I'm hoping that whatever they're making for their next generation of consoles, it's something substantial. I would love to relive the feeling that I had when I first saw the Switch or the Wii. Hopefully, whatever next generation consoles we get will actually deliver in the same way that the Switch and the Wii did. Until then though, we'll just have to wait and see.